Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, we're just about to talk about a journal entry from August 2nd, 2007. He was marked Exhibit 569. Did you review this journal article prior to today?
Yes, I did.
All right. And can you give us the context or the impression that you get after reviewing the article from August 2nd, 2007?
That Miss Arias greatly loves Mr. Alexander, and that what she's relying on is the potential that she saw in him from the beginning, that his potential for greatness is there, and that she's sort of looking at that potential and hanging on to that as what could be present. So she's hoping that that's going to be true because she loves him, and she wishes she didn't love him, but that she does.
Does this speak at all to hopefulness?
It certainly does.
And did we talk about hopefulness in the beginning when you were talking about your continuum?
Yes, we did.
So when she's talking in this particular journal entry on August 2nd, is she talking about the hope of seeing something better?
She's absolutely talking about that, and she's doing what lots of people do, which is looking back at the very beginning of a relationship and seeing all the good things that happen, because a lot of good things happen at the beginning of relationships. And she's seeing that that's possible and feeling like it's going to be possible in the future.
Okay. Also in August of 2007, are you aware of when Miss Arias saw or caught Mr. Alexander making out with another woman?
Yes.
Can you tell us what you know of that?
She walked in, I believe, and saw him on the couch with another woman, and she left.
Okay. She immediately left his house?
I believe she did.
All right. Now, at the time in August of 2007, they had, as you put, allegedly broken up, right?
Right.
But based on your reading of her journal entries and reading really of the entire information with regard to this entire case, were they still carrying on with the relationship?
They were still carrying on as if they had a relationship, yes.
All right. So what happens after she leaves? Does she talk to him about it the next day?
She goes, she talks to him the next day. He gets very upset. He says he wants to F him.
Judge, may we approach?
May.
LaViolette. We were talking about what happens when she comes back the next day and how upset Mr. Alexander got. And when he got upset, did he threaten to commit suicide?
I'm not certain that he threatened to commit suicide at that point. I think he was disgusted with himself, and he made comments about that.
Okay. Well, and that's how I don't want to misword it. So he was upset based on the things that he was doing and how he was acting. Did Miss Arias explain to you that he seemed upset with himself?
He was very upset with himself.
All right. And you were saying that, and what is it that, so he wasn't threatening to commit suicide. What was he saying then?
Objection, hearsay.
Rephrase.
Was he talking about wanting to hurt himself?
He was, I believe, hitting his head in the wall.
Okay. All right. And was he hitting his head up against a door, banging it
Yes,
repeatedly?
yes,
All right. And did Miss Arias see this?
yes.
Okay. And when she goes upstairs to talk to him about this, after he's already now banging his head and clearly upset, what is her reaction to all of this?
Her reaction is to try to calm him down, to make him feel better, and to say, basically, and to,
I don't think you were going to actually quote her, were you?
no,
Okay.
I'm not
You
quoting.
may continue.
That it was okay to date other people, but she wanted to know about it. It was okay for him to have a girlfriend, but she would like him to tell her about that.
All right. And was she attempting to calm him down?
It appeared that she was, yes.
And does Miss Arias talk to you about empathy? And maybe not in that word, I guess. But
She talks to me about feeling bad because he felt so bad, that he felt so bad that she wanted him to feel better.
okay. And is that something that you would characterize as empathy?
Yes, I would.
And is that something that happens in relationships that you've seen where one partner empathizes with the other?
It's a common practice in relationships, and in fact, it's a necessary part of relationships, is for us to empathize and understand how the other person feels and to try to deal with how the other person feels and hopefully get it back.
And what happens when one partner is empathizing with another, like in this situation where Jodi's empathizing and trying to calm him down and tell him it's okay? What does that pull her back in? Is that any reason for her to continue to stay with him?
Empathy is an incredible pull for people to stay because you're explaining someone else's behavior in a way that you can make sense of it, and you're connecting with them on their pain based on knowing how you felt before. We used to say that women in the shelter oftentimes over-empathized because it was it was something that what you heard a lot was them understanding what it was like for their partners and being pulled back in because they understood what it was like and they felt for them.
Okay. All right, I want to talk to you about a journal entry from August 13th of 2007. And again, all these journal entries, unless I say otherwise, are from Miss Arias' journal. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and this has been marked for exhibit as 570. Have you reviewed this article before?
Yes. Yes, I have.
Okay. And what is the subject matter of this particular entry?
The subject matter is the suspicion, basically the suspicion of him when he acts kind, that she's starting to suspect, feel suspicious when he acts kind to her because the behavior that's happening is more harsh and cruel and critical and mean, and that what once was not common is now common. So that what she's seeing is that this behavior that was very unusual is becoming much more commonplace in their relationship.
And did she start out by saying that she received a nice text message from him?
Yes.
And is that what, when she's talking about something that he did that was nice. Is that something that has become uncommon?
Yes, that sort of triggered the other thoughts.
Okay. And is this, and she's, does she talk about becoming numb to this type of, about the way she feels about him?
She talks about being numb. She talks about the relationship not being very good for her spiritually or emotionally. And she talks about the warning signs that she sees in the relationship as being basically big warning signs saying wrong way.
All right, and so even though she sees these warning signs and she's able to recognize that this relationship at this point is becoming not good for her emotionally or spiritually, is she ready to leave? Does she talk about that?
She's not ready to leave. She says that even though she thinks it's not going in the right direction, she thinks about the way things were. And the way things were pretty great for her, and she wants that back. And so she's still, that's where she is.
Okay.
She's not ready to leave.
All right. And is that something in your practice, do you find that that happens with women who ultimately are in abusive relationships, where they may understand that this isn't good for them, but they're just not ready to do anything about it?
Yes, it's a common thing. You don't usually see people just leave a relationship and stay gone. They oftentimes will leave multiple times, or they won't even threaten to leave. They'll stay until they get to a place where something happens that they can't explain to themselves anymore, or they don't understand anymore, or where they believe somebody really wants them to hurt or really has an ill intention to them. And that's different for everybody that I've worked with. It's just a different thing. Every human being's different about what the bottom lines for them are.
And at this point in time, we're talking about August, the middle of August of 2007, so she would have spent about a year, almost a year with him. Is that about right, if they met in September of 2006?
Yes.
So over that year, in your review of things, they've certainly had some really good times, right?
Yes, they have.
And when a relationship experiences that, the really good times, and she's talking in this journal entry about wanting those good times back, is that something that is bonding? Is that something that tends to keep people in the relationship?
Actually, it's called intermittent reinforcement or variable interval reinforcement. It's an old psych terminology, and it's basically that the hardest behavior to change is behavior that's rewarded in an inconsistent way. So that if, for instance, you know that every 3 times you press a bar, you're going to get a piece of candy, then you press it 3 times. But if you don't know when the candy's coming, you just keep pressing it because you think the candy's going to come sometime. Because it comes maybe the 10th time, and it comes maybe the 6th time, and maybe it comes the 20th time. And so you can actually have longer periods of time where people are still hoping that they're going to be reinforced or rewarded for doing the right thing.
So in that sense, then, women who stay in these types of abusive relationships are basically pushing that bar over and over again, hoping to get the reward back from their partner?
Yes.
All right. So, and what about the timing of this? This is August 13th of 2007, and she moved back to, or she not back, she didn't live in Mesa, but she moved to Mesa just in July. Is there anything that is important to you about the timing of when this, of how she is seeing these more harsh and cruel words coming from him?
Well, they didn't live in the same state for almost a year, and there seems to be an escalation, or what she's talking about is a gradual escalation from things being, okay or not, the harsh and critical and the put-downs not being regular, to all of a sudden they're regular, and she's only been living in the same town for about a month. And
so you said escalation. What do you mean?
Well, it seems that things are gradually getting worse, is what I mean.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about a journal entry from August 17th. I'm handing you what's been marked as Exhibit 571. And have you reviewed this prior to today?
Yes.
Okay, so on August 17th, can you give us the summary of the subject matter of what she's writing about?
Actually, she's writing about a sexual experience that they have and talking about a compliment that she was given by Mr. Alexander.
Okay, and the sexual experience that they have, did you also speak to Jodi about this in conjunction with reviewing the article?
Yes, I did.
And so, do you know what the sexual experience it is?
Yes, it's the first time they have consensual vaginal sex.
Okay, and when she's talking about a compliment that Mr. Alexander gives her?
Yes.
And is it just particular to her body?
It is. It's talking about her body being built for sex.
Okay, I'm sorry, you said what?
That her body is built for sex, and that she takes that as quite a compliment because he thinks she's sexy.
Okay. And does she also then talk about, after this sexual contact, does he leave?
I'm not sure that he leaves. I think he leaves,
Okay.
but I'm not certain. Oh, yes, he does leave. Yes, he leaves.
That she's reading from the document.
Okay, after reviewing it, let me ask you again. After they have this sexual contact, does he leave?
Yes, he leaves.
Possession, hearsay.
All right, and does she talk about her feelings that she has about this experience?
Yes. Basically,
Beyond the scope of the question.
What are her feelings?
basically that she doesn't feel ashamed or used or guilty, that she feels great because of the compliment.
And does she talk about feeling great physically and emotionally?
She talks about just feeling emotionally and physically great. She just feels good because she feels like she's gotten a compliment about who she is.
Okay. The fact that she brings up that she doesn't feel ashamed or guilty, does that mean anything to you?
Well, that she even mentions that she doesn't feel that way says to me that she must be thinking about that she ought to feel that way. It's called rationalization.
Okay, tell me what rationalization is.
Rationalization is sort of the most common defense mechanism that most of us use, and it's really about taking something that we've done that we don't like and explaining it to ourselves in a way that makes it viable for us, that we can live with ourselves for it. That it can be used to make our self-esteem feel better, reinforce our egos, but that basically it's something, for instance, you hear people talk about, well, I cheated on my taxes, but so does everybody else. So you make it something that is just, it's something that basically most human beings do. Probably I'd say all human beings, except you're not supposed to say all. But it's something that we do, and it's a way to live with ourselves when we do something that we don't feel real good about.
And so is that what you see here in this journal entry? Is that what she's doing?
Well, it looks like it to me.
Okay. And what do you know about having vaginal sex in their relationship, given their religion? Was that something that she, based on the religion, would have felt guilty for?
Yes, it is. Because that was the area that she set limits with. That was the area that she knew was the greatest sin, and that was the thing that she just did. So she's culpable.
What do you mean by culpable?
Well, I think that when you know you have crossed the line, you become part of that deception to a certain degree.
Okay. And in this instance, who did she cross the line with?
Mr. Alexander.
And Mr. Alexander, as far as spiritually speaking, who is he to her?
Her spiritual mentor.
So does that give her any ability to, when you talk about her being culpable then, she is wrapped up in something that they did that's considered a sin, right?
What I'm talking about is that she, I would think, probably feels culpable, not that because she has now participated in the sin that is the biggest sin in terms of chastity, that they are now bound up in this basic lie together.
Okay. And when she's rationalizing and she talks about feeling great, does she talk about that? Does she talk about how she doesn't always feel great anymore? It's rare for her.
She does talk about not feeling good about herself on a regular basis.
Okay. And so by having this sexual contact with Mr. Alexander, does this seem to make her feel good?
Yes, it does.
And in this particular journal entry, is that based on the compliment and how he treated her at the time?
Yes.
Okay. Now, a couple of days after this occurs, did you speak to Miss Arias about whether or not she ever spoke to anyone else about this sexual contact that's going on?
Yes, I did.
All right. And did she speak to anybody else?
She spoke to her friend Rachel.
And did she tell Rachel everything that she and Mr. Alexander had done?
No, she didn't. She wanted to sort of test the waters, and so she told Rachel that they'd had oral sex.
And based on the conversation that she has with Rachel, is she encouraged to go talk to the bishop?
Rachel tells her she needs to go to the bishop right away, that both her and Mr. Alexander need to go to the bishop, that she's crossed lines and they need to get a consult from the bishop.
Okay. And does she go to speak to Mr. Alexander about it?
Yes, she does.
Ultimately, does Mr. Alexander agree to go?
No, he doesn't agree to go. He indicates that he's been in trouble for this before.
Sustained.
And so ultimately, does Mr. Alexander go to the bishop to see the bishop with Miss Arias?
No, he does not.
Does that do anything with regard to the fact of, you were talking a few minutes ago about culpable and being wrapped up in this, basically this lie or this deception of what they're doing? She reaches out to a friend who gives her advice, and then she ultimately doesn't take her up on the advice after speaking with Mr. Alexander. Does that do anything as far as their relationship and in isolating her or giving her people an outlet to express her frustrations or express her feelings?
Well, I think she probably knows that the person she felt safe with, which was Rachel, is somebody she can't talk to about this again. And it sort of binds them together in the deception, because there's a lot of talk from Mr. Alexander that he's a virgin. So there's a picture of who he is. And if she goes to the bishop, it ruins his reputation, and it doesn't do much for hers either.
In your experience with other couples, when you talk to the women, whether or not they would tell on their partner about abuse or emotional abuse or physical abuse, did you run into issues where the women didn't want to tell anybody because of their partner's reputation?
Frequently. Even when the partner didn't have a really good reputation, they were reluctant to talk, either by way of them losing a career, by way of them losing status in the community, by way of them being seen as less than. Most of the women I worked with were very cautious. In fact, and it didn't seem to matter if these were women who had a lot or didn't have a lot economically, if they were educated or not educated, if they were religious or not religious, that pretty much across the board that they went out of their way to protect the person that they loved.
Even though that person might have been emotionally or physically abusive with them?
Yes.
And do you start to see that happening in this relationship here, where Miss Arias is restricted basically on who she can talk to about what's happening?
Yes, I think she's, her isolation, what they've got now is a secret, and the secret is between the two of them. And as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's our secrets that oppress us. So when you've got a secret and the only person you share the secret with is the person that you've got the problem with, if you've got the problem, then you don't have anybody else. You pretty much don't feel that you have the ability to talk to a lot of other people about it.
Okay. And for right now, she's at least writing in her journal about things, right?
Yes.
Although in your review of things, in this particular journal article, or that of August 13th, does she ever actually say that they had vaginal sex?
No, she doesn't.
Okay. So when she's writing in her journal, is she being very detailed about the actual facts of what's going on?
No, she's not.
All right, I want to talk to you about a journal entry from August 26, 2007, and this is in evidence. It's Exhibit 510. And in the beginning, she writes that she's glad that nobody else reads this journal, right? Because she loves Travis Alexander.
Yes.
And with regard to this particular journal, does she talk about how she loves him, but then that it's not always what she wishes?
Yes. Clearly she talks about having two very separate experiences with him, and one that he makes her sick and one that he makes her happy, one that he makes her sad, one that he makes her miserable, one where she feels uplifted, one where she feels and feels beautiful. So she's back and forth. She's got the best and the worst is what it seems like.
All right. And then does she talk about does she say that all in all, I shouldn't be wording it as if he makes me feel those things, right?
Yes, that's part of the laws of attraction.
Okay.
As well.
And she goes on to say it all originates from within.
Yes.
So, and you said that's part of the law of attraction?
Yes, that she would have the power to, that she doesn't have to feel bad if she thinks in a more positive way. Okay. If she thinks more positively, if she acts more positively, that she'll feel more positively despite what's going on.
Okay. And she talks about all of her darkness as a result of her own creation. Is that also speaking to that she has the power to change Mr. Alexander?
She has the power to change her own life, which, I mean, if you extrapolate, could mean that she has the power to change Mr. Alexander, but definitely that if she thinks and feels differently, that she will think and feel differently.
Okay. And then from going to talking about how much she loves him, does she also talk about how sad she is?
She wishes she could die. So yes, she's feeling very bad. And I think that's, you know, the back and forth of feeling like she has a relationship that's very important to her, that she cares about, that she wants to work out, and on the other side she feels terrible. And she can't really reconcile those two things very easily.
Okay. In this particular journal entry, do you see self-blame?
Sure.
And not just on this page, obviously, but the whole thing, what we're reviewing.
What she's talking about is being able to change things, and she's not doing it. So she blames herself for not doing it. She blames herself for not being, I guess, more effective in a sense.
Okay. And is she talking about that she's basically unable to get out of this relationship? She's not ready.
She's not ready to get out of the relationship. She's still tied to that relationship.
And is that unusual at all, given the fact that she's so down when she talks about suicide, that still doesn't make her ready to leave?
No, I have met with many, many women who absolutely are down, they're depressed, they're not functioning as well at work. In fact, I had a nurse that I worked with who was a psych nurse, and she was told she needed to get help because she was more depressed than the people in the locked unit, and that if she didn't get help, she would lose her job. And that's why she came for help. But she wasn't able, and unless she was forced with that kind of situation, she was so down, she couldn't ask for help. And on the other side of it, the relationship was very abusive. And she was isolated. There were a whole series of things that happened in that relationship, but what eventually happened was she was isolated from her family, she was isolated from friends, that her only, resource basically was the person who was abusing her.
All right. So even when people feel that down, or like this journal entry talking about suicide, that, in your experience, has not been a reason to ultimately get the woman to leave the relationship?
No.
It
depends, but
okay.
generally, if someone is not ready to leave, they're not ready to leave. And it doesn't matter what somebody else says, it's the state that they're in. It's what they believe. It's what they feel.
And I think that you talked to us a little bit about it doesn't matter what somebody else believes or thinks. So in other words, when someone is feeling this way about their relationship, and this push and pull of the relationship, a lot of times do they not express that to their friends or family because they think that they know that they're going to say, well, leave, and they're not ready to do it?
If you have supportive friends and family, a lot of times your supportive friends and family want you to take an action you're not ready to take. And so and the other part is, you don't want your friends and family to think that the person that you're with isn't a good person. You don't want your friends and family to think you have bad taste. You want people to spend time with, so you tend to minimize and deny what's going on.
Okay. Also, at the end of this article, does she talk about staying at Rachel's, and that if Travis found out, he'd get upset?
Yes, because Mr. Alexander doesn't like Rachel.
And is that based on the conversation about going to the bishop?
I am not sure, but I would suspect that that would have something to do.
All right. Based on the timing of this journal entry, it's at the end of August, right? August 26th?
Yes.
All right. And we know that they had the first consensual vaginal sex on August 17th. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And sometime after August 17th is when Miss Arias spoke with Rachel about going to the bishop?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I want to talk to you about an email on September 11th of 2007. May I approach? I'm handing you what's been marked as Exhibit 572. And is this an email from Mr. Alexander?
Yes, it is.
And is this to a woman named Matilda Edvinson?
Yes, it is.
All right, and the subject matter of this email, what is it?
About pictures that he would like her to send him.
Okay, and these pictures, are they for business, or can you get a sense from reading the email what the pictures are for?
He wants to drool over them all day.
Objection.
They are sexy pictures, not naked pictures.
Okay, and do you have a copy of the pictures that she sends?
Yes, I do.
All right, and this is sent September 11th, 2007, right?
Yes.
And at that time, based on what you know about the case, obviously Mr. Alexander was in an alleged relationship, allegedly broken up, but still carrying on a relationship with Miss Arias, right?
Yes.
And at this time, was he also in a relationship with someone named Lisa Andrews?
Yes, he was.
And so based on this email to another woman, is there anything significant about it to you?
Well, that he's able to manage not being truthful to several women at a time.
Objection, speculation.
In speaking with Miss Arias, did she have any idea that he was emailing other women, asking for pictures of them?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Or I guess I should ask, did she have any specific knowledge as to this particular woman?
No, she did not.
All right. And what else about this email is important, if anything?
Just that, that there's, at this point, Jodi, Arias, Lisa Andrews, who are in relationship, active relationship with Mr. Alexander, and that he's also trying to encourage another relationship with someone else at the same time.
Does that speak to infidelity at all?
Well, it certainly speaks to infidelity. It also speaks to
Objection, speculation.
Approach. You may continue.
All right. So with regard to infidelity, when somebody is chronically, and I'm not speaking of Mr. Alexander, but when somebody is chronically, when there's chronic infidelity, is that a form of abuse?
that's
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
it's considered a form of psychological abuse if someone is chronically unfaithful.
Okay. And it's psychological abuse, you said?
Yes,
Why is that?
because the partner who's involved in that situation is living in fear of relationship ending, is generally not getting the same amount of attention as they did. They may be dealing with the guilt of the person who's chronically unfaithful. And what we've seen with people who are guilty in a chronic way is that guilt can light the fuse to anger.
What do you mean by that?
If you feel guilty, and this is what I've seen over the years with a number of the men in my group, that when they feel guilty and they're faced with looking at the pain in somebody's eyes or the reaction of their partner, that they get angry because it doesn't feel good to feel guilty. And so if I'm externalizing the blame, I'm going to blame you for making me feel guilty. And I hear that sort of over and over again, which is, you've got me on a guilt trip. And what I will ask them is, are they still doing the things they feel guilty about? And most often they say yes. And I say, well, to get off the guilt trip, you have to stop doing what you feel guilty about. It's not that other person, although they can trigger it. It's that you continue to do the things you feel guilty about.
And so when feeling guilty, you say triggers anger, is that, do you tend to see escalation in either psychological, emotional, or physical abuse?
Yes, you can.
Okay. All right. I want to talk to you about September 13th, which is a journal entry. And I'm going to show you from the actual journal, which is exhibit number 242.001. This is from September 13th of 2007. Can you review that for a moment? Or do you need to review that?
I haven't seen this. So,
Oh, did you lose the page? Oh, it's marked, I think. With the black,
okay.
not with the blue.
It's,
September 13th you have?
oh, okay.
I think there's a black ribbon that goes through the
Oh, all right.
diary.
This is September 9th.
Okay, so go forward. I'm looking for September 13th.
All right.
All right, and it's a journal entry where they talk about going to have a supai, where Miss Arias talks about going to have a supai. Do you need to review that for a second?
Well, I know about this incident, I just hadn't seen the journal
Okay.
itself.
You've seen a photocopy of it, you mean?
Yes,
Okay. Do you need to review it anymore, or are you good?
I think I'm pretty good. Depends on how detailed you get.
All right. Well, let us know if you need to look at it.
Okay.
All right. So this particular journal entry on September 13th, are you aware of a trip that Jodi takes with Mr. Alexander and Daniel and Desiree Freeman?
Yes,
All right. And is it the four of them on this trip?
yes it is.
And does Miss Arias talk in her journal entry about a negative impact or something happening at the beginning of the trip?
She says that basically,
Overruled, you may answer. Yes or no?
yes,
All right. And what does she say? What's your takeaway from the reading the journal?
Approach, please. You may continue.
All right. And besides reviewing the journal entry, did you also speak with Miss Arias about this particular trip?
yes, I did.
All right. And what is significant to you about this trip that they have to have a supai?
That,
Objection, she's just reading Exhibit 244001.
I don't think she is.
All right, you may answer without referring to the exhibit.
all right. That basically there was an explosion that Mr. Alexander exploded at her and that she felt quite devastated by it, but that later on he apologized, which was not all that common, and how much it meant to her that he took responsibility for 90% of what happened that day.
All right. And in this particular event, do we see any type of a cycle?
Well, you see that there's a tension that happened at the beginning of the day when they were doing their hike, and then an episode where he explodes, and then an apology, which is kind of that loving respite period where he's sorry that things happen, and he's actually taking responsibility for it.
And how does that make her feel, the fact that he apologizes and takes responsibility for the argument?
Makes her feel very good, that it's different than he's showing her, that he's taking responsibility, and that doesn't often happen, and that helps the rest of the time.
All right. And does that help for her to reconcile the argument that she has with him? In other words, to keep going, to to stay on the trip and stay in the relationship?
Well, they definitely stay on the trip, and they definitely stay in the relationship. So I would say you could go there.
All right. Based on your review of the journal entry, does it become apparent to you that she's feeling worse about herself?
I haven't finished reading this journal entry.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and review it?
Sure. It doesn't sound like she's feeling worse about herself. It sounds like she's continuing to think in a positive way and that she wants things to work out. And she's with people that she cares about. She cares a lot about the Freemans, and they're all together, and she's feeling gratitude, and she wants to maintain that gratitude.
Okay. And in maintaining that gratitude, is she trying to maintain those good feelings about the relationship?
Sure.
In the beginning of the journal entry, when she talks about the incident, the fight that they have, is she talking about how it impacted her the entire day?
She said that it
Objection, hearsay, yes or no?
yes.
All right. So did it impact her the entire day?
Yes.
All right. Does she talk about how she feels on the inside? In other words, how she carries herself on the outside versus how she feels on the inside?
Not in this particular entry, no.
No? Okay. All right. Then let's move on to, well, let me ask you this. This particular trip to Havasupai, you said it was just the four of them, right?
Yes.
And the, do you learn anything about Mr. Alexander's behavior from reading an interview with Desiree Freeman?
Yes, I did.
What did you learn?
She describes Mr. Alexander as clingy with Miss Arias during this trip.
Okay. And during this trip in September of 2007, are you also aware that he is in a relationship with Lisa Andrews at this time?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Let's talk about September 23rd. This has been marked as Exhibit 573. Let me know if you need time to review it.
No.
And you've obviously reviewed this before, right?
Yes, I have.
All right. So, with regard to September 23rd, this is a journal entry where, with Miss Arias writing in her journal, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And what is the context or the subject matter of this entry?
A lot of self-blame, that she's contemplating suicide, that she does not like what her life has become, that she's pathetic, that kind of thing. She goes on about that. She goes on about being heartsick.
All right. And you talk about self-blame. Is she blaming herself for her situation?
She's looking at where her life was before and saying that if she could go back a number of years, that she would, but that she can't. And then she pumps herself back up and says, but I know I can make things better or worse during the next 5 years. And so she's going back with that laws of attraction. And she talks about her lack of discipline. She calls herself a ridiculous lack of discipline.
So when she talks about a ridiculous lack of discipline, the relationship that she's in, is this because it's her own fault? Is that what she's saying?
She's basically saying that a lot of how she feels and the fact that she's suicidal is her own fault.
Okay. And then when you said she pumps herself back up, what is she trying to do? Is that fitting into the laws of attraction?
That's that she can move forward and that she has control about what happens with her life when she moves forward. That she can make the next 5 years magnificent, or she can make them terrible, or she can make them wonderful, or she can make them ugly. So she's talking about her own ability to create, sort of what she puts out there.
All right. And is she taking into account at all about the ability of changing someone else to make that happen?
She doesn't seem to be doing that. She seems to be believing that if she only does it right, that her life will be better.
Is that significant to you when you're looking at the progression of this relationship?
Well, it's significant in the ways I've discussed before, which is that her belief in this law of attraction and the reality of her life are sort of, bumping heads. And it keeps her, I think, kind of confused and unable to move. She's kind of stuck because she keeps believing that whether or not Mr. Alexander changes, she can change things.
All right, and so that keeps her stuck? Is
Yes.
that a yes? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Did you review an email from Lisa Andrews to Travis Alexander?
Yes, I did.
And was that written September 2007?
September 23rd, 2007. Yes, it was.
Okay. I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Exhibit 385. Let me know if you need to review it. All right. In this particular email, this is from obviously another woman, from Lisa Andrews. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And based on the context of the email, is it your understanding that Ms. Andrews is currently involved in a relationship with Mr. Alexander in September of 2007?
Yes.
And in September of 2007, is she writing him basically a list of complaints and feelings that she has about their relationship?
Yes, she is.
Based on your impressions of this email, what is it that you get out of this email from your own impressions?
That she believes that they have gotten too sexual too soon, talks about making out.
And you're talking about Lisa Andrews and Mr. Alexander?
Right.
Okay.
That she feels that he has basically pushed on her, talked about sex a lot in a way that she doesn't appreciate, that she wants him to stop grabbing her butt, particularly in public, and that he has ignored that and continues to do that, that he talks sexually to her in a way that she feels uncomfortable with and wants him to stop, which he doesn't, that she finds that unattractive and doesn't appreciate it, that her values don't seem to be important to him, that he's always needing compliments, in fact, that it's very hard to give him compliments because he wants them so often. And I think one of the other things that is important is that he kind of makes a dig at her. She feels that he's uncaring, and that she wants to be a teacher, and she's very proud of wanting to be a teacher. And on the one hand, he tells her that being a teacher is that she'd be good at it. And on the other hand, that if that's what she wants to do with her life, it sucks.
So is that one of those examples you were telling us about earlier, the subtle emotional or subtle psychological abuse type thing where somebody says something that is kind of a compliment but then takes it right back and that type of thing?
Not only takes it back, but makes it something derogatory. And so that's in there. And the other, she alleges to the fact that he hasn't had sex yet and that she knows he wants it, that there's a lot of sexual tension that is part of his life on a regular basis, and that he just needs to be patient because basically someday he'll get to have sex too.
Based on your reading of this email, does it become clear that Miss Andrews believes that he was a virgin?
Yes.
Based on what you know from Miss Arias, was that true?
No, it was not true.
In your review of other documents on the case, did you learn what the age difference was between Miss Andrews and Mr. Alexander?
There was a 10, almost 11-year age difference between the two of them.
All right. And what about this email then is important to you with regard to Jodi and Mr. Alexander's relationship?
One of the things that is talked about in this email is that she didn't know that Jodi was going on the trip. She talks, there's a discussion about him being overly negative about the trip and that she had no idea he was going with Miss Arias, but that she was upset that she didn't know that, but that she believed that he must be giving Miss Arias some encouragement because women don't hang around if they don't get encouragement. So she was distrusting what he was telling her about this. And so that was part of the discussion that went on in this email. And later she says that they talked.
Based on your impression of the email, I guess, right? Is that what you're about to say?
Right.
Okay.
That she felt better.
Objection, speculation, hearsay.
Sustained. Rephrase.
Well, based on the impression of the email and the contents of the email, do you have an understanding as to whether or not Miss Andrews felt any better?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled, you may answer yes or no.
Yes.
Okay, and what was that?
That she felt better because they spoke with each other.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, she felt better because why?
She felt better because they had a conversation, and after the conversation, which I'm not sure what was said during the conversation, but because of the conversation, she felt better.
Okay. Do you see any patterns of behavior emerging between the way that Mr. Alexander treated Miss Arias versus the way that Mr. Alexander and Miss Andrews, their similarities in their relationship?
Yes.
What do you see?
I see an aggressive sexuality that's there with two women who are vulnerable, one who is a lot younger, one who is vulnerable just coming out of a relationship. I see a possessiveness where he, in public is physically affectionate and refuses to listen when someone is saying, this is not, I don't want this to happen. That he has, in both these cases, put these women down, but then sort of backs off of it.
And can we talk about, at some point, are you aware of whether or not Mr. Alexander ever referred to Miss Arias as a skank?
Yes.
But then turns it around?
Yes.
And tries to say that it's a joke?
Yes.
All right, and you know that based on the emails that go back and forth between the Hugheses and Mr. Alexander?
Yes, I do.
And so is that something similar that you see with regard to his teacher comment?
Yes, it is something similar.
Okay, and is that because he's putting them down but then saying, oh, no, you misunderstood me type of thing?
Objection, leaving.
Overruled. He's not even pulling them back.
Okay.
He's pulled back the scan comment with Miss Arias, but he hasn't pulled back the comment about Miss Andrews choosing to teach and saying that would suck, basically.
Okay. Do you see, what about the compliments? That Miss Andrews says that Mr. Alexander, something about needing compliments all the time. Do you see similarities between that and the way that things happened with Miss Arias?
Well, Miss Arias says in her journal, or there's a discussion in the journal about as long as things are positive, and she keeps things positive with Mr. Alexander, that things are good. And there's a basic, it feels, my interpretation, a basic neediness from somebody who's asking for compliments all the time. And then the discussion with Miss Andrews is that he doesn't give them back, that he doesn't compliment her, but he wants them all the time, and it becomes very difficult for her to give him compliments.
And incidentally, in your review of the case, are you aware of other women who have said the same thing, that Mr. Alexander is constantly in need of compliments from these other women?
Yes.
All right. What about, do you see any type of deception going on at this point?
Yes, I see deception going on.
What kind of deception?
There's a belief by Miss Andrews that he is faithful to her, and I'm not sure about what Miss Arias believes at this point, but I believe she knows something about the relationship, but I'm not certain.
All right, let me ask you about Miss Arias, though. Did she, based on your conversations with her, did she ever feel like she could go and date other people, or certainly have a full-on relationship with another man while she's in this quasi-relationship with Mr. Alexander?
No, she didn't.
Okay. So the deception you see is from the fact that, with regard to Miss Andrews?
I see deception in a lot of areas, that there's deception about being a virgin. So there's a belief in the community that he's a virgin. Miss Andrews is part of that community. There's a belief in the community that he's a virgin, and he perpetuates that belief. There's a belief that he's financially successful, and he perpetuates that belief, and there's not a lot of evidence to say that he is. He's deceptive about what he's done sexually. So there's deception about who he is. There's deception about relationships with other women. So where he's emailing.
Did you review other text messages and emails from other women and Mr. Alexander?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so based on those, what is it that you see?
Approach, please.
Ms. LaViolette, when you talk about deception with regard to deceiving other women, do you have specific, do you know who these women are, the names, I mean?
I know the names of many of the women.
Okay, go ahead, tell me what they are.
Chriselle, Reagan, Nicole, Denise, Shaitanya, Maria, I believe probably Deanna, Jodi, Lisa.
All right, and this email that we just went through, Matilda?
Matilda.
Okay. based on, are there conversations going on with all of these women at some point?
Yes, there are, and Krista is another one.
Okay. And when you talk about deception, what do you mean?
I mean that it doesn't appear that these women are aware of each other, so that he is able to lead a life of deception and somehow reconcile that with his own faith and his own behavior, that he is somehow able to pull that together and compartmentalize his life so that he can have these relationships with all these different women.
Sustained.
All right, well, we'll get to some of those text messages a little bit later. Let's talk about September 27th, and this is just a journal entry on September 27th from Miss Arias, and she writes a gratitude list. Did you see those in her journal entries?
Yes, I did.
And just generally speaking, this is exhibit that's been marked as 574. But about her journal entries, did you see where she writes these gratitude lists?
Yes, I did.
And what were those about?
She was writing about 5 things she was grateful for. She decided to do that as a way to make herself feel better, to start the day well.
Overruled.
And her number one, the number one item on her gratitude list was Mr. Alexander.
Sustained.
All right, with regard to this journal entry, does she make a gratitude list?
Yes, she does.
And when she's talking about gratitude, she's being thankful for what she has in her life. Is that right?
Yes, she
Okay.
is.
All right. And does she put Travis Alexander on this list?
Yes, she does.
And where?
Overruled.
Number 1.
All right. Does that speak to what she was feeling about him at that time?
Certainly.
Okay.
She's most grateful for him.
All right. And so are you seeing where she's having like loving feelings towards him?
She's most grateful for him, so if I go a step further, I would say that it's because of loving feelings.
Okay. So when we're talking about the relationship in September of 2007, and I know we talked about this horrible fight in Havasu and things like that, ultimately, though, is she still having this struggle where there are some good days where she keeps hoping for and then bad days?
Yes, there are absolutely good days and bad days.
Okay. And is that important to you?
It's important to me in that when somebody is looking at the good days and the bad days, until they get to a place where the bad days weigh more, even if they're about equal, the good days weigh more. And so you kind of put in perspective what you've got, and this perspective is, there's more good than bad in this relationship, and when we feel connected, I feel very connected, and so I'm still there.
Okay. As part of your review of this case, did you review emails between Mr. Alexander and a person named Deanna Reed?
Yes, I did.
And was there ever any emails that you reviewed where Miss Reed was asking him to pay her back?
Yes.
Approach. Take a 5-minute recess. Please go back to the jury room. We will call you back shortly. Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and counsel. You may continue.
Thank you, Honor. Ms. LaViolette, did you review an email that was written October 3rd of 2007?
I bet I did.
Okay. Did you review an email that had to do with Mr. Alexander owing somebody money?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And that was besides the email that we've already discussed with Ms. Hughes, right?
Excuse me?
This was in addition to the email that we've already discussed regarding the money that he owed to Ms. Hughes.
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. I want to talk to you about a journal entry on October 6th of 2007. It's been marked as 576. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So on October 6th, this is a journal entry from Miss Arias, right, into her own journal.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And what is it, the subject matter of this journal entry?
She's, the subject matter is Deanna Reed and Travis's, Mr. Alexander's impression that she's become like Deanna Reed.
Okay,
That-
I'm sorry, let me stop you there. So
Okay.
maybe let's back up a second.
Okay.
Based on your review of this case, do you know who Deanna Reed is?
Deanna Reed was the woman who Mr. Alexander was in love with and had a relationship with for, I believe, 7 years.
Okay. And was he still in contact with her while he was in a relationship with Miss Arias?
Yes, he was.
And was he still in contact with her when he was in a relationship with Miss Andrews?
Yes, he was.
And was he still in contact with her when these other women that you mentioned with regard to the text messages and emails that you reviewed, was he still in contact with Miss Reed as well?
Yes, he was.
All right. And based on your conversations with Miss Arias, what did she believe about Miss Reed as far as how Miss Reed treated Mr. Alexander?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled. You may answer.
Miss Arias believed that Deanna Reed was a little crazy and maybe, well, that she was crazy and jealous.
All right. And did Mr. Alexander often have Miss Arias not come into the home or drop him off around a corner to avoid seeing Miss Reed?
Objection, lack of foundation, reading.
Overruled. You may answer yes or no.
Yes.
All right. And is this information, did Miss Arias ever have any substantial conversations with Miss Reed?
Not that I'm aware of.
So where did this information come from?
From Mr. Alexander.
All right. And so back to this October 6th journal entry, you said that Mr. Alexander seems to be comparing Miss Arias to Miss Reed?
Yes.
And this is what Jodi is writing in her journal, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Does she explain why Mr. Alexander feels that way?
She is talking.
Sustained.
Is that how and why does she explain Mr. Alexander feeling this way?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
She says that he believes that he has to hide relationships from her in the way he hid relationships from Miss Reed.
Okay. And now we're in October of 2007, so they've had their official breakup in June, right?
Yes.
but have, in your review of the conversations that they have and the contact they have, does it appear like they're still having a relationship?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And what does Miss Arias think about being compared to Miss Reed?
She thinks it's ridiculous that
Okay.
she's not like Miss Reed, and that he's delusional if he thinks that. Actually, on crack is, I think, the wording.
All right. And in your review of her journal entries, you said that Miss Reed was characterized as being jealous.
I believe that's what Miss Arias told me, jealous, crazy, that she was a crazy,
Okay.
kind of crazy.
All right. And in reviewing the journal entries, did you see any notions of jealousy coming from Jodi?
No, I didn't.
And did you see notions of jealousy coming from Mr. Alexander?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And have we talked about some of those issues already?
Yes, we have. We've talked about them.
All right. Let's talk about just a few days later. Actually, just the next day on October 7th. Are you aware, do you remember reading a journal article where, and I believe it's actually in the same exhibit, where she talks about motherhood?
Yes.
And what is the context, or what is your impression of her thoughts and feelings about motherhood?
She is attending a talk on motherhood, and she's talking about the importance for her of being the matriarch in a family, of being a good mother, of being a good wife, and that this was a really, this was at the forefront of what she wanted in her life, to be a mother and a wife, and to be a spiritual matriarch in the family.
All right. And in speaking with Miss Arias, is this something that, was she starting to feel like she wasn't going to get this from Mr. Alexander?
Yes, she was feeling that way.
Okay, and so by October of 2007, do we have her starting to feel like the relationship with Mr. Alexander is not going to end up in marriage?
Well, that's back and forth, because although she says that, the behavior lends me to believe that there's still hope that that could happen.
All right, so is she going through this learned hopefulness?
I believe she is, yes.
All right, so is she still, when you talk about this back and forth behavior, is that something that you see in your practice, this back and forth behavior between feeling like, okay, it can work, and then, oh, and it's not going to work?
Absolutely, it's very common.
All right, let's talk about October 13th, journal entry on October 13th, and this has been marked as Exhibit 577. And I believe around this time, are you aware of them taking a trip?
Yes.
All right, do you need to review that?
I'm not reviewing the entire email, but I know the gist of the email.
And when you say email, do you mean journal entry?
I'm sorry, the journal.
Okay, all right. So where is it that they go on a trip in October?
They go to a balloon festival in Albuquerque.
All right, and during this time, are you aware that whether or not Mr. Alexander is still dating Lisa Andrews?
I believe he is still dating.
Based on your information that you reviewed in the case, are you do you have the understanding that they were still dating?
I do.
Okay. And yet it's Mr. Alexander who takes Jodi with him to this balloon festival, right?
Yes.
And we talked earlier about when they go on trips together and how it's very bonding for them. Do you see that type of bonding going on with this trip?
Yes. There's talk about trying new foods, trying alligator. I forget what else they're trying. Frog's legs. They're trying new food, and that it's a good trip.
All right. Is this, you talked earlier about, I think it's called variable interval reinforcement?
Yes,
Is this something that you see here?
yes,
Okay, why?
because you never know when the good things are going to happen, but they happen and they're good things. And so there's something to look forward to. There's something to believe. If I stick with this, you know, I can have what I want. I can eventually have what I want. And so when you bond, when you take these trips and when you share special things, and I think they do, I think in this relationship they do share special things. I think that's what keeps people in a relationship, is that they share special things, and those things are hard to give up.
All right, and is this one of those special times that you see based on her journal entries?
Yes,
And in speaking with her as well, right?
yes,
Okay. As part of your review, you also talked about other emails between Lisa Andrews and Mr. Alexander?
yes,
And did you review one in October where Mr. Alexander is reassuring Lisa that issues have been dealt with?
yes.
Tell us about that.
I don't remember the exact date, but I remember that
Objection, hearsay.
Approach, please.
You may continue.
Okay, so with regard to this email, not talking about the specifics of it, but in this email from Mr. Alexander to Miss Andrews, do you see him reassuring her that everything is okay?
Yes, and that he's dealt with Jodi. He's dealt with the Jodi issue.
Sustained.
Okay.
The jury is directed to disregard the last response. It is stricken from the record.
Okay. So in other words, do you see this, have you seen Mr. Alexander doing such a thing before in other relationships or with other women, this reassuring? When somebody's upset or somebody's suspicious of his actions, do you see him doing this reassuring?
Just like a foundation, date and time, women.
Yes or no?
Yes,
Okay. And so is this one more time that you see it?
yes.
Okay. What about this incident is important to you?
That shortly after they come back from a trip, Mr. Alexander and Jodi Arias come back from this trip where they've had a really good time and they've bonded with each other, that he is reaffirming a relationship with another woman and saying that he's dealt with the Jodi issue. I'm sorry.
Not that part.
Okay. And that basically the one woman has nothing to worry about.
Do you find this to be deceptive at all?
I find it to be very deceptive.
And what about manipulative?
Well, it's manipulative in that when you lie to somebody who cares about you and they believe you, it reinforces them to believe what you say.
And do you see this happening and to reinforce the relationship so that the woman stays?
Excuse me?
Do you see this happening so that it reinforces the relationship so that the woman stays in the relationship?
Yes, yes. Our minds don't tend to go where our minds haven't been. So if we are not people who generally lie, we generally believe people tell the truth. And so when someone we love and trust tells us something, we tend to believe it unless we are also tend to lie about things.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about at the end of October. I believe that is, let's see, towards the end of October, do we see the first incident of physical violence?
Yes, we do.
All right. And did you speak with Miss Arias about this?
Yes, I did.
All right. Can you tell us about what happens?
There's an argument about everything, about clothes, about how Miss Arias dresses, about her friendships, about her jobs. And there's Mr. Alexander grabs her by the shoulders and shakes her. She wants to leave. He says, "You're not leaving." He pushes her. She falls to her knees. And he berates her in a verbal way as well. And this goes on for a while. They continue to talk after this, and the relationship, I mean, there's...
They continue
sort
to
of-
talk till it calms down?
Yes,
Okay. And this happens over a period of a couple hours?
yes.
One of the things that Miss Arias specifically recalled with regard to this argument had to do with her family. Do you remember that?
That according to Miss Arias, that Mr. Alexander called her family names, called her grandfather, that she was talking about her brother, and his name was Carl, and basically said that was a gay name. And she said, "Well, it's my grandfather's name," and he said he was probably a fag too, and that there was the putting down of her family.
Is that significant to you?
Yes, it's significant, first of all, that somebody calls names to somebody's family, and that he calls them gay names. I mean, I'm not sure why that was, but the putting down of somebody's family is significant. Putting down of people that you care about is significant.
All right. And what about her not being able to leave? What does she say about that?
Well, in Dr. DeMarte's report, she says she could have left. But initially, he tells her he can't leave, or that she can't leave, and I don't know that she really tried to leave. She stayed, he was escalating, he was yelling at her, and she stayed and calmed him down.
Now, is that something
Then she got to leave.
Okay, after she calmed him down.
Right.
This fighting and this berating that goes on, and then she stays and ultimately stays till he calms down. Is this a cycle, or is this a pattern that you see in relationships in your own with your own patients?
Yes, it is.
Tell me about that.
Well, the pattern being that they have some kind of intense exchange that could be verbal, it could be psychological, it could be physical, it could be all of the above, and that after that happens, there's this quiet period. There's usually a period where people make up. It's called the loving respite. Lenore Walker calls it the honeymoon phase, where they bond again. Because and this happens in arguments with, with folks that aren't abusive. Usually, if you have an argument with somebody you love, and you make up, you feel closer to that person because you've gone through something together and you've found a way to patch it up, and so you make up. In a domestically abusive relationship, it's even more intense because the event tends to be more intense.
The event, the tension part, you mean?
The incident.
The incident tends to be more intense.
Yeah.
All right, and in this particular incident, he actually pushes her down. Is that
Yes.
part of the physical violence of it?
Yes.
And we talked earlier about how sometimes women in these relationships don't feel like they have a choice. We talked about the power differential. I think we were talking about the Diamondbacks game, and it doesn't feel like a choice to make a choice, I guess. Is that something similar to this situation where ultimately she tried to fight her way out? Maybe she could have gotten out versus feeling like she didn't have a choice to leave with someone like that?
It could be a situation like that. I mean, when someone physically restrains you, you usually don't have much of a choice. So it's not just a matter of feeling like you don't have a choice. It's more a reality that you don't have a choice. And at some point, she may have had a choice, and she didn't act out on that choice.
And when somebody physically restrains you or is physically violent with you, do people tend to fear that if you do something that the person doesn't like, they might do it right again?
Yes.
Does Miss Arias tend to think that this might have been when it happens in October of 2007, does Miss Arias tend to think that this is an isolated incident?
Yes, she says that it's an isolated instance.
Okay. What does that mean to you?
Well, in terms of the physical encounter, it's the first one. So she sees this as aberrant, as unusual, as not something that typifies the relationship. The verbal things, those are things that she's described as becoming more common and becoming things she expects. But the physical was not something she expected and saw it as an unusual act and maybe didn't even see that it would happen again, probably didn't see that it would happen again. And Mr. Alexander may not have seen that it would happen again either.
All right. And is that part of the hope that the ability on Mr. Alexander's part to hope that he doesn't do something like this again, and the ability to hope by Miss Arias that he's not going to do it again?
Yes.
All right. And all All right, let's talk about a journal entry in October 26, 2007. And is it your understanding that this journal entry is after this physical incident?
Yes.
Okay. This has been marked as Exhibit 578. All right, do you remember reviewing this email, or this journal entry prior to today?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and what is the context? What is it that you get out of this, your impressions of this journal entry?
That Jodi is thinking that she may be starting to get over Mr. Alexander, that she thinks she may have learned something, that she's kind of quick to fall in love and slow to fall out of love, but because of the way he treats her, because of the things he says and does, that she believes she's starting to lose attraction for him.
Okay, so in October of 2007, do you start to see this, an inkling, I guess you'd say, of her starting to pull away?
An inkling. An inkling is where she's actually starting to say to herself, I'm starting to get over him and it's about time.
Okay. And at the end of the journal entry, does she talk about who she's become?
She talks about becoming a shadow of what she once was, that she saw herself as a much healthier, much more directed person. She doesn't say those words, but that she indicates now that she's not what she used to be and she's a shadow of what she once was, less than she once was.
All right. And based on the timing of this journal entry, is this about a little over a year into their relationship?
Yes, it is.
All right. Thank you. Probably good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m., please remember the admonition. Have a nice evening. You are excused. Record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Counsel, anything else for this evening? We are at recess. Let me step down.